All right, let's dive right into this. Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to unpack our latest research drop today because we are looking at the fundamental architecture of how we perceive reality itself.
Absolutely, man. Look, in our last breakdown on balancing the 0 and the 1, we established a pretty heavy truth, right? Stability is dynamic. It is not static. It's a living flow. But here's the kicker. As soon as you finally understand that, you walk face first into the next major trap.
So, the big continuity question for today is just that. Why do we constantly freeze up and get trapped in the one? Why do we get so rigid? Well, it happens because we fundamentally mistake the digital and mental interface for the actual physical dirt we are standing on. Basically, we confuse the map for the territory. Exactly. And to really understand why our brains do this, we have to look at the work of cognitive scientist Donald Hoffman. His interface theory of perception completely dismantles our everyday assumptions about reality. Hoffman points out that evolution did not tune our sensory systems to see objective truth. Instead, it tuned us to survive. And it did that by rendering a highly compressed, convenient desktop user interface. Think about your laptop for a second. When you drag a blue folder into the trash can icon on your screen, you aren't literally touching microscopic silicon transistors or magnetic bits on a hard drive. You were manipulating a simplified icon that was specifically designed to hide the staggering complexity of the machine from you.
Yeah, the overarching rule of evolutionary game theory here is incredibly simple. Fitness beats truth. Or, in Dr. Dude terms, we evolved to survive the jungle, not to be all-knowing mystics right out of the gate. Seeing the literal truth of the universe's source code would probably just overload our brains and get us eaten by a tiger. But here is the fatal error of modern civilization. We completely forgot that the interface is just a mechanical utility. We actually started believing that the rendered desktop icons are the reality.
So let's look at the living substrates and really map out the difference between the ground and the overlay. To understand this framework, we have to clearly demarcate the fertile ground of our lived biology, which we call the 0, from the artificial grid of algorithms and labels, which is the 1. Lived biological experience, human consciousness, the literal breath in your lungs, that is the fertile ground. But the social structures, the algorithms, the credit scores, the notifications, that is merely an artificial grid laid over the soil to help us organize it. And what's really fascinating here is that this divide isn't just some philosophical metaphor. It is structurally wired into our neurological architecture. Psychiatrist Ian McGilchrist maps this out brilliantly in his monumental work, The Master and His Emissary. McGilchrist divides how the two hemispheres of our brain apprehend reality. The left hemisphere is the emissary. It operates entirely in the 1, the grid. Its attention is narrow, explicit, abstract, and heavily mechanistic. It essentially breaks the world down into manageable, utilitarian tools. The right hemisphere, however, is the master. It operates in the 0, the ground. It handles the broad, implicit, living context. It's what actually experiences the whole breathing ecosystem.
But here's where the train totally derails. McGilchrist calls it the catastrophic inversion, where the emissary actually usurps the master. The left brain basically gets completely hypnotized by its own map. It's a classic Gnostic parallel, man. It's like a demiurge building a closed-loop matrix. The left brain creates this highly structured virtual world of categories and metrics, and then it traps the user inside, making us react endlessly to synthetic pixels instead of engaging with the actual source code of life.
Which brings us to the very real cost of living inside that overlay. When you operate entirely in rendered abstractions, the biological ground inevitably starves, and the symptoms of this neurological imbalance are literally everywhere in modern society. We experience massive derealization and screen fatigue. We see a pervasive metric obsession driven by mechanistic reductionism. We literally reduce complex, living ecosystems to quantifiable resources, and we judge the richness of human life by algorithmic engagement. This creates the static trap, where we treat dynamic human beings as rigid user interface assets to be managed, rather than treating them as living entities.
Right, it's literally like obsessively polishing the trash can icon on your desktop while your computer's motherboard is catching fire. Our research notes point out something absolutely vital here. A static rule is a terrible fit for a dynamic process. When you apply the inflexible static rules of the 1-2 to a dynamic living process, you create massive system fragility. You crush human vitality. You simply cannot fix a living, breathing ecosystem with a spreadsheet.
So, how do we fix the glitch? This is where we introduce the sovereign override, learning how to use the UI without being used by it.
The absolute crucial point to remember is that technology, labels, and systems aren't inherently evil. They are simply mechanical utilities, but they require conscious governance. You have to learn how to be the user. We structure this governance through a model called the sovereign self, represented in our system's blueprints as the equation 3P equals S. That means aligning your 3 core perspectives to equal your sovereign state. Now, while we aren't going to break down the deep math of the 3P principles today, you need to know this is our central framework for translating abstract self-mastery into concrete, structured, daily execution.
There are 3 core steps to start acting as the user and not the avatar. First is cognitive demarcation. You have to clearly recognize where the interface ends and the living ground begins. Stop confusing the two. Second is strategic engagement. You use the tools, the screens, and the systems of the one to execute your deliberate will, but you never outsource your internal authority to them. And the third step, which is honestly where the magic really happens, is regrounding in the 0 point. You have to regularly shut off the render. You have to touch base reality through direct presence, breath, and somatic awareness. This protocol essentially ensures that we are subordinating the emissary's linear analytical outputs to the master's holistic synthesis. See, while the emissary desperately wants to box reality into a disconnected virtual world, this override ensures that our social interactions remain grounded in genuine empathy and contextual meaning rather than just sterile algorithmic control.
Let's bring this all together with our conclusion and get into the Vault's dispatch for today.
To get extremely practical here, how do we actually bypass this hyper-analytical intellect on a daily basis? Well, we have to use physical routines to force internal stillness and literally step off the digital pavement. You can directly alter your neurological state by consciously relaxing your physical sensory organs. Remember, the left hemisphere relies on tight, sharp, narrow beam staring, so employ soft ocular focus, basically the lazy eye trick. Close your eyes, let the ocular muscles completely relax, and when you open them, do not stare at any single object. Take in the whole room at once through your peripheral vision. It softens the visual field and immediately quiets the internal monologue. Couple that with listening as flowing water. Listen to the raw physical vibrations of the room, the hum of a fridge, traffic outside, without attaching a cognitive label or name to the sounds. Just pure hearing.
And then, you absolutely have to initiate the Sabbath practice. Literally put the phone away in a drawer, completely out of sight for a portion of your week. It is going to be hard at first. You are going to feel those neurobiological withdrawals. You'll literally feel phantom phone vibrations in your pocket. Endure it. Push past the static to reestablish your presence in the biological present. Find that peace. I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Whenever you feel completely overwhelmed by the metrics, the notifications, or the structural systems of the world, ask yourself, are you trying to plant seeds in a screenshot? Because you can't grow anything real in the interface. Step off the grid, remember the biological soil beneath your feet, and master the interface without becoming its battery.
If you want to dig deeper into the actual mechanics of this, go read the full research paper, check out the interface diagrams, and grab the systems blueprints over at journey.cxwx.xyz. Until next time, stay limber, abide, and keep wandering.